Top 5 Deadliest Battles in U.S. History. Top 5, the Battle of the Bulge, 1944 to 1945. When people think of the bloodiest battles involving the United States, many imagine the beaches of Normandy or the jungles of Vietnam. But one of the most devastating battles ever fought by American forces took place in the freezing forests of Belgium during the final months of World War II. This was the Battle of the Bulge. By December 1944, many Allied soldiers believed the war in Europe was nearly over. Germany had suffered major defeats, and Allied armies were pushing steadily toward the German border. Morale was high, and many American troops expected to be home within months. But Adolf Hitler had one last gamble. On the morning of December 16, 1944, more than 200,000 German troops launched a surprise offensive through the Ardennes forest, a region considered too difficult for a major attack. Thick fog and poor weather grounded Allied aircraft, allowing German forces to strike with devastating effect. The attack caught many American units completely off guard. German tanks smashed through defensive lines, creating a huge bulge in the Allied front line, giving the battle its famous name. Thousands of young American soldiers suddenly found themselves fighting for survival in snow-covered forests under some of the harshest winter conditions of the war. Temperatures dropped far below freezing. Many soldiers suffered frostbite before they ever saw the enemy. Weapons froze. Supplies ran low. Medical evacuations became nearly impossible. Yet despite the shock of the attack, American troops refused to collapse. One of the most famous moments occurred in the town of Bastogne. Surrounded by German forces, the 101st Airborne Division found itself trapped. German commanders demanded their surrender. The American response became legendary. Nuts! That single word symbolized the determination of the American defenders. For days, the soldiers of Bastogne fought without adequate food, ammunition, or winter clothing. German artillery pounded their positions relentlessly. Casualties mounted every hour. Yet the defenders held. Across the battlefield, brutal fighting erupted in villages, forests, and frozen fields. Tank battles raged through the snow. Small groups of soldiers became isolated and fought desperate last stands against overwhelming odds. The Germans initially gained ground, but their advance came at a terrible cost. Fuel shortages slowed their armored units, and as the weather cleared, Allied aircraft returned to the skies, attacking German columns and supply routes. Gradually, the momentum shifted. American reinforcements poured into the region. Veteran units launched counterattacks, pushing the Germans back. What Hitler had hoped would be a decisive victory became a catastrophic failure. By late January 1945, the battle was over. The numbers were staggering. The United States suffered approximately 89,000 casualties, including over 19,000 killed. It was the deadliest battle ever fought by American forces during World War II and remains one of the bloodiest engagements in U.S. military history. Entire families back home received telegrams informing them that sons, brothers, and fathers would never return. Yet the Battle of the Bulge achieved something important. It shattered Germany's final offensive capability in the West. After the battle, the German army could no longer mount a major attack against the Allies. The road into Germany was open, and the collapse of Nazi Germany became only a matter of time. Today, the snow-covered forests of the Ardennes are quiet. But beneath those trees lies the memory of one of the greatest tests ever faced by American soldiers. Exhausted, outnumbered, and freezing in one of the coldest winters of the century, they held the line against Hitler's last desperate gamble. The Battle of the Bulge ranks number 5 among the deadliest battles in U.S. history, not only because of its enormous casualties, but because it showed the resilience and determination of soldiers fighting under impossible conditions. And as deadly as it was, for battles in American history claimed even more lives. Top 4, the Meuse-Argonne Offensive, 1918. By the autumn of 1918, World War I had already consumed Europe for more than 4 years. Millions of soldiers had died in trenches stretching from the North Sea to Switzerland. Entire generations had been lost. Yet despite the unimaginable bloodshed, the war still had no clear end. For the United States, however, Everything was about to change. America had entered the war in 1917, and by 1918, hundreds of thousands of fresh American troops were arriving in France. Their mission was simple but incredibly dangerous: help break the German army and end the war once and for all. The largest and deadliest operation assigned to American forces became known as the Meuse-Argonne Offensive. It began on September 26, 1918. More than 1 million American soldiers participated, making it the largest military operation in United States history up to that point. The battlefield stretched across dense forests, steep hills, fortified positions, and heavily defended German strongholds. The Germans had spent years preparing their defenses. Machine gun nests were hidden among the trees. Barbed wire covered entire fields. Artillery positions were carefully concealed. Every hill and ridge had been transformed into a fortress. American soldiers were ordered to advance directly into this deadly maze. The first assault began with one of the largest artillery bombardments ever conducted by the United States. Thousands of guns opened fire simultaneously, shaking the ground for miles. Then came the advance. Young American troops climbed out of their trenches and moved forward through mud, smoke, and constant enemy fire. Almost immediately, casualties began to mount. German machine guns cut down attacking formations. Artillery shells exploded among advancing soldiers. Communication often broke down completely. Units became lost in the dense Argonne forest, where visibility was limited and German defenders could strike from hidden positions. One of the most famous episodes involved the Lost Battalion. A force of approximately 550 American soldiers advanced deep into enemy territory and became surrounded by German troops. Cut off from supplies and reinforcements, they endured days of relentless attacks. Food ran out. Water became scarce. Friendly artillery accidentally struck their positions. Yet they refused to surrender. By the time they were rescued, fewer than 200 men remained capable of fighting. Stories like this unfolded across the battlefield. Every mile gained came at a terrible price. Entire companies disappeared during attacks on heavily defended German positions. Medical stations overflowed with wounded men. Stretcher bearers worked around the clock as casualties continued to rise. Despite the losses, American forces kept pushing forward. Week after week, they attacked German defenses, slowly wearing down an exhausted enemy that could no longer replace its losses. The arrival of fresh American troops gave the Allies a numerical advantage Germany simply could not match. By November 1918, the German army was nearing collapse. The pressure created by the Meuse-Argonne Offensive played a major role in forcing Germany to seek an armistice. On November 11, 1918, the guns finally fell silent. World War I was over. But the cost had been enormous. During the 47-day offensive, the United States suffered approximately 122,000 casualties, including more than 26,000 killed. No other battle in American history has resulted in more U.S. combat deaths in a single campaign. The Meuse-Argonne Offensive remains the deadliest battle ever fought by the United States in terms of Americans killed in action. The victory helped bring an end to one of humanity's most destructive conflicts, but it came at a heartbreaking cost. Across America, families received news that sons who had crossed the Atlantic to fight for freedom would never return home. Today, the forests and hills of northeastern France appear peaceful. Yet beneath that quiet landscape lies the legacy of thousands of American soldiers who fought and died during the final push that helped end World War I. The Meuse-Argonne Offensive ranks number 4 on our list of the deadliest battles in U.S. history. And as horrific as its losses were, 3 battles still produced even greater overall casualties for American forces. Top 3, the Battle of Gettysburg, 1863. In the summer of 1863, the United States faced its greatest internal crisis. The nation had been torn apart by the American Civil War. Brother fought against brother. Families were divided. Entire communities found themselves on opposite sides of the conflict. For more than 2 years, the war had raged across the country, leaving tens of thousands dead. Yet neither side had achieved a decisive victory. Then came Gettysburg. A small town in Pennsylvania would become the site of the bloodiest battle ever fought on American soil. In June 1863, Confederate General Robert E. Lee launched an ambitious invasion of the North. Fresh from several military victories, Lee believed a major success in Northern Territory could force the Union to negotiate peace. If that happened, the Confederacy might secure its independence. To stop him, the Union Army of the Potomac, commanded by General George G. Meade, marched north. Neither side initially planned to fight at Gettysburg. The battle began almost by accident on July 1, 1863, when advancing Confederate troops encountered Union cavalry west of the town. What started as a small engagement quickly escalated. More soldiers poured into the area throughout the day. Fierce fighting erupted in fields, forests, and along ridges surrounding Gettysburg. By nightfall, Union forces had been pushed back through the town. But they established strong defensive positions on high ground south of Gettysburg. The stage was set for one of the most important battles in American history. On July 2, Confederate forces launched a series of massive assaults against Union positions. Some of the most famous fighting occurred at places that have become legendary in military history. Little Round Top, Devil's Den, the Wheat Field, Peach Orchard. At Little Round Top, Union soldiers desperately defended a rocky hill that anchored the left flank of their army. Running low on ammunition, Colonel Joshua Chamberlain ordered a bayonet charge. The daring attack stunned Confederate troops and helped save the Union position. Meanwhile, thousands of soldiers fought hand-to-hand combat across the battlefield. Cannons roared continuously. Rifle fire echoed through the hills. The wounded covered the fields. By the end of the second day, casualties had already reached shocking levels. Yet the worst was still to come. On July 3, General Lee made a decision that would define the battle forever. He ordered a direct assault against the center of the Union line. Nearly 13,000 Confederate soldiers advanced across open ground under intense artillery and rifle fire. The attack became known as Pickett's Charge. As the Confederate troops marched forward, Union guns tore gaps through their ranks. Entire units disappeared in clouds of smoke and explosions. Still, the attackers continued. Some reached the Union lines and engaged in brutal close-quarters fighting. But the assault ultimately failed. The survivors retreated. The Confederate Army had suffered a devastating defeat. After 3 days of relentless combat, the numbers were staggering. More than 50,000 soldiers were killed, wounded, captured, or missing. It remains the bloodiest battle ever fought in the history of the United States. For America, Gettysburg marked a turning point. The Confederacy would never again launch a major invasion of the North. From that moment forward, the initiative gradually shifted to the Union. For months later, President Abraham Lincoln visited the battlefield. There, he delivered one of the most famous speeches in history. The Gettysburg Address. In just a few hundred words, Lincoln honored the fallen and reaffirmed the nation's commitment to freedom and unity. Today, Gettysburg is one of the most visited historic sites in America. Its rolling hills and open fields appear peaceful. But in July 1863, those same fields witnessed unimaginable violence. Thousands of Americans fought and died there, not against a foreign enemy, but against one another. The Battle of Gettysburg ranks number 3 on our list of the deadliest battles in U.S. history. A battle that changed the course of the Civil War, preserved the Union, and left scars that would shape America for generations. Yet incredibly, 2 battles involving American forces resulted in even greater overall casualties. Top 2, the Battle of Normandy, 1944. By June 1944, Nazi Germany still controlled much of Western Europe. For nearly 4 years, Hitler's forces had occupied France, turning the continent into a fortress. The Allies knew that if they wanted to defeat Germany, they would have to return to mainland Europe. The operation would become one of the most ambitious military campaigns in history. Its name was Operation Overlord. and its opening act would forever be remembered as D-Day. In the early hours of June 6, 1944, thousands of Allied aircraft crossed the English Channel. Paratroopers jumped into the darkness behind enemy lines. Warships moved into position along the French coast. Then, as dawn approached, the largest amphibious invasion in human history began. More than 150,000 Allied troops landed in Normandy. Among them were tens of thousands of American soldiers. Their objective seemed simple on paper: establish a foothold in France. The reality was far different. German defenses stretched across the coastline. Concrete bunkers overlooked the beaches. Machine guns were positioned on cliffs. Artillery batteries waited behind fortified positions. The Germans had spent years preparing for exactly this moment. When American troops approached beaches such as Omaha Beach, they entered a nightmare. Landing craft opened their ramps. Immediately, machine gun fire swept across the water. Soldiers fell before even reaching the shore. Many drowned under the weight of their equipment. Others were cut down while struggling through the surf. Entire units became trapped behind obstacles and seawalls. The beach quickly filled with wounded and dead soldiers. Yet despite the devastating losses, the Americans continued moving forward. Small groups of soldiers climbed cliffs under enemy fire. Engineers cleared obstacles while bullets flew around them. Officers and enlisted men alike led desperate assaults against German strongpoints. Every yard gained came at a terrible cost. By the end of D-Day, thousands of Americans had become casualties. But the invasion had succeeded. The Allies had established their foothold. The battle, however, was only beginning. Over the following weeks, American forces fought through the dense hedgerows of Normandy. The countryside proved deadly. Tall hedges divided fields into natural fortresses. German troops used them to launch ambushes and delay Allied advances. Progress was painfully slow. A village captured one day might require hundreds of casualties. A few hundred yards of ground could cost dozens of lives. Tank crews, infantrymen, artillery units, and paratroopers all endured relentless combat. The summer heat added to the misery. Bodies remained scattered across battlefields. Supplies often struggled to keep pace with advancing troops. Meanwhile, German forces fought desperately to prevent a breakout. One of the fiercest battles occurred around the town of Saint-Lô. Nicknamed the capital of ruins, it became a symbol of the brutal fighting across Normandy. Buildings were reduced to rubble. Roads disappeared beneath craters. Entire neighborhoods were destroyed. Still, the battle continued. Finally, in late July 1944, American forces launched Operation Cobra. The attack broke through German defenses and opened the way into France. German armies began retreating. The liberation of Paris soon followed. For Hitler, the defeat in Normandy marked the beginning of the end. But victory came at an enormous price. The Normandy campaign lasted from June to August 1944. During that time, American forces suffered approximately 135,000 casualties, including more than 29,000 killed. Thousands more were wounded or missing. The campaign became one of the deadliest operations ever conducted by the United States military. Yet its importance cannot be overstated. Normandy reopened Western Europe. It forced Germany to fight on multiple fronts. And it created the pathway that eventually led Allied armies into the heart of the Third Reich. Today, the beaches of Normandy appear calm and beautiful. Tourists walk across the sand where thousands once fought for survival. Rows of white crosses stand in military cemeteries overlooking the sea. Each marker tells a story of sacrifice. Each represents a life cut short during one of the most important battles in history. The Battle of Normandy ranks number 2 among the deadliest battles involving American forces. A campaign that helped save Europe from Nazi domination and ultimately led to the downfall of Hitler's regime. But one battle remains above all others. A battle so massive, so destructive, and so costly that it stands as the deadliest conflict ever fought by Americans. Top 1. The Battle of Okinawa, 1945. By the spring of 1945, Nazi Germany was on the verge of collapse. In Europe, Allied armies were closing in on Berlin. But in the Pacific, the war against Japan was far from over. American military leaders faced a terrifying question. How could they invade the Japanese homeland? The answer would begin with Okinawa. Located only about 340 miles from mainland Japan, Okinawa was considered the final stepping stone before a full-scale invasion of the Japanese home islands. Both sides understood its importance. And both sides were prepared to fight to the death. On April 1, 1945, more than 180,000 American troops landed on Okinawa. It was the largest amphibious assault of the Pacific War. At first, the invasion seemed surprisingly easy. American soldiers moved inland with little resistance. Some commanders even believed the Japanese defenses had collapsed. They were wrong. Japanese General Mitsuru Ishijima had chosen a different strategy. Instead of defending the beaches, he concentrated his forces in heavily fortified positions in the southern part of the island. There, thousands of soldiers waited inside caves, tunnels, bunkers, and underground strongholds. The Americans soon found themselves fighting one of the most brutal battles in military history. Every hill became a fortress. Every cave concealed defenders. Every advance was met with machine gun fire, artillery, mortars, and sniper attacks. Unlike many earlier battles in the Pacific, Okinawa became a grinding war of attrition. Progress was measured in yards rather than miles. Rain turned battlefields into oceans of mud. Vehicles became stuck. Supplies struggled to reach the front lines. Wounded soldiers often remained exposed for hours before they could be evacuated. One of the most infamous positions was Sugar Loaf Hill. American forces attacked it repeatedly. Each time they captured the position, Japanese defenders counterattacked. Then the Americans attacked again. The hill changed hands multiple times. Thousands died fighting for a few hundred yards of ground. Elsewhere, fierce battles erupted at Shuri Castle, Kakuzu Ridge, and countless unnamed ridges and caves. The fighting became so intense that some veterans later described Okinawa as hell on earth. The suffering extended beyond the battlefield. Hundreds of thousands of Okinawan civilians found themselves trapped between the two armies. Many were killed during bombardments. Others died from starvation, disease, or crossfire. Entire communities disappeared. The island became a humanitarian catastrophe. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy faced its own nightmare offshore. Japan launched massive waves of kamikaze attacks. Pilots deliberately crashed explosive-filled aircraft into Allied ships. The attack sank dozens of vessels and damaged hundreds more. For sailors, there was often little warning. A single aircraft could turn a ship into an inferno within seconds. The casualty figures continued to rise. Day after day. Week after week. Yet neither side showed any willingness to surrender. Finally, after nearly 3 months of relentless combat, organized Japanese resistance collapsed. On June 22, 1945, the Battle of Okinawa officially ended. The cost was staggering. American forces suffered more than 49,000 casualties, including over 12,000 killed. The U.S. Navy lost thousands more sailors during kamikaze attacks. Japanese military losses exceeded 100,000 troops. Civilian deaths are estimated to have reached well over 100,000 people. Few battles in modern history have produced such widespread devastation. For American leaders, Okinawa delivered a frightening lesson. If capturing a single island had cost so many lives, what would happen during an invasion of mainland Japan? Military planners estimated that hundreds of thousands of American casualties could result from such an operation. Those fears would play a major role in one of the most controversial decisions in history, the use of atomic bombs against Hiroshima and Nagasaki just weeks later. Today, Okinawa is known for its beautiful coastline and peaceful landscapes. But beneath that beauty lies the memory of one of the bloodiest battles ever fought. The Battle of Okinawa ranks #1 among the deadliest battles involving American forces. It was the final great battle of World War II in the Pacific. A battle that demonstrated the terrible cost of war, reshaped the future of Japan and the United States, and helped bring the deadliest conflict in human history to its conclusion. For the thousands who fought and died there, Okinawa remains a lasting reminder that victory can come at an unimaginable price.